During my grandfather's 80th birthday party, my sister humiliated me in front of our entire family and announced, for the grandson who only appears when there's free food, I was standing near the back of the living room, a half-empty bottle of Coors in my hand, trying to blend into the pine-paneled walls of the ancestral cabin. 35 people were crammed into a space originally built to comfortably sleep 8. The air was thick with the smell of Aunt Susan's famous brisket, damp wool sweaters, and the suffocating heat radiating from the massive stone fireplace. Outside, Estes Park was locked in a bitter Saturday night freeze, the temperature dropping fast toward the single digits. Inside, my older sister Ashley was holding court. Ashley had stayed in Denver. She married a local orthodontist named Greg, drove a pristine white Range Rover, and had spent the last decade positioning herself as the ultimate caretaker of the family legacy. I had moved to Seattle at 22 to work as a software architect. In Ashley's narrative, which she broadcasted loudly and frequently, I was the selfish runaway who abandoned his roots for tech money and rainy weather. She stood on the hearth, tapping a spoon against a wine glass to get everyone's attention. It was time for her infamous family awards. She had done this every 5 years since Grandpa turned 70. She started light. She handed out a printed certificate to our cousin Mark for most likely to burn the turkey, which got a solid round of applause. She gave Uncle Ryan an award for loudest snorer on the annual camping trip. Everyone laughed. The mood was warm, fueled by boxed wine, and the kind of forced family cheer that happens when people who only see each other twice a year are trapped in a room together. Then she reached behind the mantel and pulled out a framed, transparent piece of plastic. It looked like she had gotten it custom made at a trophy shop. She looked right at me over the heads of our relatives. The smile on her face was tight, rehearsed, and sharp. And finally, she announced, her voice projecting effortlessly over the chatter, the Phantom Menace Award. A few cousins preemptively chuckled. They knew exactly where this was going. For the grandson, who only appears when there's free food, Ashley read from the plaque, holding it up for the room to see. While the rest of us actually stay here, put in the work, and keep this family afloat. The room erupted. It wasn't just a polite giggle, it was full-throated laughter. My cousin Mark snickered and nudged his wife. Uncle Ryan clapped his hands together, his face red from the heat and the beer. I looked toward the center of the room. Grandpa was sitting in his favorite worn leather recliner, positioned right in front of the fire. He let out a raspy, shaking chuckle, nodding his head in agreement with Ashley's assessment. It was the part that actually hurt, seeing him laugh. 3 years ago, my mom called me at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. She was sobbing so hard she could barely form a sentence. It took me 20 minutes to calm her down enough to understand what was happening. Grandpa, fiercely independent and deeply stubborn, had gotten caught in a predatory reverse mortgage scheme. He had combined that disaster with a decade of completely ignoring the property taxes on the cabin. The county wasn't just sending warnings anymore. They had scheduled the cabin for public auction in exactly 14 days. Grandpa had been too ashamed to tell anyone. He had been hiding the foreclosure notices in his tool bench in the garage. Mom only found out because she saw a final notice taped to the front door when she drove up to check on his frozen pipes. I didn't hesitate. I didn't consult anyone. I booked a flight to Denver 6 hours later. I bypassed the family entirely and hired a commercial real estate attorney in Fort Collins. I liquidated a massive chunk of my company stock options, took the tax hit, and wired exactly $250 to clear the tax liens and pay off the predatory lender in one brutal, non-negotiable sweep. To make sure it never happened again, my lawyer and I set up a blind trust. I transferred the title of the cabin into it. Grandpa was granted a lifetime estate, meaning he could live there forever, rent-free, without ever worrying about a single bill. I paid the annual taxes directly from an account I set up just for that purpose. I made my mom swear on her life not to tell Ashley, and not to tell Grandpa where the money came from. Mom convinced them that the bank had miraculously granted a hardship forgiveness program after she pleaded with a regional manager. Grandpa's pride remained completely intact. He still believed he was the master of his domain. Ashley still believed she was the only one who actually cared about the family's well-being. And now, here I was, standing against the wall, listening to them laugh at me. Seriously, thanks for flying in for once, stranger, Ashley said. She walked through the crowd, parting our cousins like the Red Sea, and tapped the plastic award against my shoulder. Try not to eat all the brisket before you disappear for another 2 years. The laughter kept echoing off the log walls. I looked at Ashley's smug face. I looked at Greg, who was smirking behind her. I looked at my mom, who was sitting on the sofa, her face completely pale, staring at the floor. She knew. She was the only one in the room who knew exactly what was happening, but she was too paralyzed by the family dynamic to speak up. I set my beer bottle on the wooden mantel. I didn't say a word to Ashley. I walked past her, brushing her shoulder, and headed down the narrow hallway toward the guest bedrooms. I went to my duffel bag, which was sitting at the foot of the bunk beds. I unzipped the side pocket. Inside was the thick, heavy manila envelope I always brought with me when I visited Colorado, just in case the county assessor or the trust attorney needed updated wet signatures for the filings. I pulled it out. The string clasp was frayed from being opened and closed over the years. I walked back into the living room. The chuckles were dying down, transitioning into the low hum of normal conversation. But people stopped talking as I pushed my way back toward the fireplace. I walked straight up to Grandpa's recliner. I dropped the heavy envelope directly onto his lap. It hit his thighs with a loud, dull thud. "What's this?" Grandpa asked, looking down at it, his bushy eyebrows pulling together in confusion. "Just some light reading," I said. My voice was calm, but the adrenaline was making my vision narrow. Ashley stepped forward, rolling her eyes. "Oh, what? Did you bring your tech company prosthetics to show off?" Grandpa didn't listen to her. His arthritic fingers fumbled with the metal clasp. He unwound the string and pulled out the thick stack of papers. Sitting right on top was the official Larimer County tax assessor's receipt from 3 years ago. It was stamped with a massive red "paid in full." Right below the stamp, my full legal name was clearly printed as the sole payer. Beneath that receipt was the legal trust documentation documentation securing the cabin, showing my signature as the grantor. Grandpa slowly reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out his reading glasses. He pushed them up his nose. The room went completely dead. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the firewood popping and hissings behind me. Grandpa's hands started to tremble. The paper shook in his grip. He stared at the bolded number at the bottom of the receipt, $114,250. He stared at it for a long, agonizing time. Then, very slowly, he looked up at me. His face had lost all its color. The jovial, laughing patriarch from 2 minutes ago was gone, replaced by an old man realizing the absolute gravity of his situation. Ashley, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere, stepped closer and peered over his shoulder to read the document. Her smug smile vanished instantly. Her jaw physically dropped. This says you paid it, she stammered, her voice suddenly high and thin. She looked at our mother on the couch. Mom said the bank dropped the case. Mom protected his pride, I said. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. In the dead silence of that room, my voice carried into every corner. The bank didn't drop anything. There was no hardship program. They were 24 hours away from changing the locks on this front door and throwing his things out onto the snow. Ashley looked like she had been physically struck in the chest. She took a half step back, bumping into Greg. Uncle Ryan stared firmly at his boots, shifting his weight, suddenly intensely interested in the floorboards. I turned my attention entirely to my sister. I didn't do it for a trophy, I said, pointing at the cheap plastic award she was still gripping in her left hand. And I never wanted anyone to know. I was perfectly fine letting you play the hero. But I am sick and tired of being the punchline to your jokes about loyalty. I saved the very roof you're standing under to mock me. Ashley opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. For the first time in 32 years, my sister had absolutely nothing to say. I didn't wait for an apology. I didn't want one. I turned to Grandpa. Happy 80th birthday, Grandpa. I love you. I walked to the front door, grabbed my heavy winter jacket off the hook, and walked out into the freezing air. The cold hit my face like a sheet of glass. I exhaled, my breath pluming white under the yellow glow of the porch light. My boots crunched loudly against the packed snow as I walked to my rental car, a dark gray Chevy Tahoe parked near the edge of the tree line. I unlocked it, climbed inside, and hit the ignition. The engine roared to life, but the heater blew ice-cold air. I sat there for a minute, gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering against my ribs. I put the car in reverse, backed out onto the gravel driveway, and started the slow, winding descent down the mountain toward Route 36. The headlights cut through the dense pines. I felt a massive, hollow weight lift off my chest. 3 years of keeping my mouth shut, 3 years of biting my tongue during Ashley's passive-aggressive phone calls. All of it was out in the open. I was about 10 miles down the mountain, just hitting the outskirts of town where the cell service finally kicks back in, when my phone screen lit up in the center console. It was buzzing frantically. Not a phone call. Texts. One after another, rapid fire, vibrating against the plastic cup holder. I ignored it at first. I figured it was Mom, apologizing for not standing up for me, or maybe Uncle Ryan trying to smooth things over. I kept my eyes on the icy road, but the phone didn't stop. It buzzed continuously for 2 solid minutes. Finally, it started ringing. I glanced down. It was Mom. I pressed the speakerphone button on the dashboard. Mom, I'm already on the highway. I'm going straight to the airport hotel. I'll call you tomorrow. You need to turn the car around, she said. Her voice wasn't just panic this time. It was sharp, terrified. I'm not coming back tonight, Mom. Let them process it. No, listen to me, she said, her breath catching in the microphone. Ashley didn't stop reading. She took the envelope from your grandfather. She went into the dining room and spread all the papers out on the table. There's nothing there but the receipts and the trust formation, I said, keeping the steering wheel steady as I took a sharp curve. She brought Greg in to read the legal jargon, Mom said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper, like she was hiding in a bathroom. They found the clause about the blind trust, the part that names you as the sole trustee and ultimate beneficiary upon his passing. That's how a life estate works, Mom. I put up the money, I hold the asset, he gets to live there until he dies. It protects him from ever being foreclosed on again. We talked about this. She's not reading it like that, Mom said. I could hear a door slamming in the background through the phone. She's standing in front of the whole family right now, telling them you tricked a confused old man into signing away a $2 million property for pennies. She's telling Uncle Ryan that you stole their inheritance. I hit the brakes. The Tahoe fishtailed slightly on a patch of black ice before the anti-lock brakes caught and straightened the heavy vehicle out. I pulled over onto the snowy shoulder of the highway, shifting into park. Are you kidding me? I said, staring blankly into the dark woods ahead of me. I saved him from being homeless. She just told your grandfather he doesn't own his own house anymore, Mom said, and now she was fully crying. He's having a panic attack in the kitchen. Ashley is telling him you committed elder abuse. She's calling Greg's brother on Monday morning. He's a litigator. The heater finally started blowing warm air, but the inside of the car suddenly felt freezing. She wants the trust voided, Mom whispered. She said she's going to take you to court to rip the deed out of your name. I let out a dry, exhausted laugh that sounded loud over the hum of the Tahoe's heater. I leaned my head back against the cold leather headrest and stared up at the dome light. Let her, as I said. You don't understand, Mom pleaded, her voice cracking. Greg is riling everyone up. He's pulling up Zillow estimates on his phone. He's telling your grandfather that the property is worth at least $2.2 million and that you secured it for $114,000. He's calling it elder fraud. Mom, listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice dropping an octave, completely devoid of the panic she was swimming in. I didn't buy the house. The trust bought the debt. The only reason the house still belongs to the family is because the trust holds the deed. If Ashley takes me to court and somehow miraculously voids an ironclad legal document drafted by a 40-year veteran of commercial real estate law, you know what happens? The deed reverts to Grandpa, and the second it reverts to Grandpa, the county's original foreclosure order reactivates because the tax payment was made conditionally through the trust. They will seize the property, put it up for public auction, and he will be out on the street in 30 days. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the faint sound of Uncle Uncle Ryan yelling something in the background. Did you hear me? I asked. Yes, Mom whispered. Tell Greg to stick to putting braces on teenagers. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I shifted the car back into drive. I'm hanging up now, Mom. I'm driving to Denver. Turn your phone off and go to bed. Wait, she's coming back. There was a muffled scuffle over the speaker, the sound of a phone fumbling against fabric, and then a sharp, breathless voice cut through the line. You absolute piece of shit. It was Ashley. Good evening, Ashley, I said, pulling back onto the dark, icy highway. Enjoying the brisket? You think you're so smart, she snarled. The polished, smug tone from the fireplace was completely gone. She sounded feral. You think you can just swoop in here with your Seattle tech money and steal Grandpa's house out from under him? Out from under us? I didn't steal anything. I paid his debts. You manipulated a vulnerable old man. He didn't even know what he was signing. He signed it in front of a notary at the Larimer County Courthouse, I said, keeping my eyes locked on the taillights of a semi-truck a quarter-mile ahead. He read every page. He knew exactly what it was. The only thing he didn't know was that it was my money, because he was too ashamed to admit to the family that he'd run his life into a ditch. I saved his dignity. Something you just tore to shreds in front of 30 people because you couldn't stand not being the center of attention. Don't you dare turn this around on me, Ashley yelled. Greg's brother is a partner at a firm in Denver. We are filing an injunction on Monday morning. We are going to freeze the trust, we are going to audit your finances, and we are going to expose you for exactly what you are. Do it, I said flatly. What? I said, do it. Call Greg's brother. File the injunction. Burn 10 grand on a retainer. And when you do, the judge will look at the public record, see the $114,250 tax lien I paid off, and laugh you out of the courtroom. But if you push it too far, Ashley, if you actually manage to break the trust, you will trigger the default clause. The county takes the house. Grandpa loses everything. And you will be the one who made him homeless, not me. You're lying, she said, but her voice faltered. Just a fraction. I'm not, but you go ahead and test it. Let's see how much you actually care about Grandpa when it costs you your own money. I reached over and tapped the red button on the dashboard screen. The call disconnected. The car plunged back into the quiet hum of the road and the whistling of the freezing wind against the windows. My hands were shaking. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, locking my elbows, trying to force the adrenaline out of my system. My chest felt hollow, carved out by a dull, aching exhaustion. 32 years of family history, 32 years of being the punching bag, the punchline, the runaway. It had all exploded in the span of 10 minutes. The drive to the Denver airport took another hour. I checked into a generic Marriott right off Pena Boulevard. The lobby smelled like heavily perfumed carpet cleaner and stale coffee. I gave the night auditor my credit card, took my key card, and rode the rattling elevator up to the 4th floor. The room was freezing. I cranked the wall thermostat up to 75, tossed my duffel bag onto the luggage rack, and sat on the edge of the stiff king-sized bed. I didn't even take my boots off. I just sat there, staring at the muted television screen, listening to the airplanes roaring off the runways a few miles away. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. 5 new text messages. 3 from Mom, begging me to call her back. 1 from Uncle Ryan, which just read, "We need to have a men's meeting about this tomorrow. Don't leave town," I scoffed. A men's meeting. Ryan hadn't held down a steady job since 2018. He lived in a condo Mom co-signed for him. Now he wanted to play patriarch because he smelled money on the table. I opened the 5th message. It was an unknown number with a 970 area code. Estes Park. This is Mark, my cousin, the one who had snickered at Ashley's joke by the fireplace. Ashley just kicked everyone out. The party is over. Half the family is driving down the mountain in the dark. Grandpa is locked in his bedroom and won't come out. I just wanted to say, I didn't know, none of us knew. What Ashley did was messed up. If what you said is true, thank you for saving the cabin. I stared at the glowing words for a long time. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from anyone in that family. I didn't reply. I just locked the screen, plugged the phone into the charger on the nightstand, and finally took my boots off. I barely slept. I kept waking up, my brain spinning through legal contingencies, wondering if Greg's brother really was a litigator, wondering if a sympathetic local judge might actually grant a temporary injunction just to appease an old man claiming confusion. My lawyer in Fort Collins was good, but local politics in small-town Colorado could be messy. By 7 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I showered, letting the scalding water beat the tension out of my neck, and went down to the lobby to get a burnt coffee from the complimentary breakfast buffet. I sat in a vinyl booth in the corner of the dining area, watching the snow fall outside the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. I pulled out my laptop, connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and pulled up the PDF of the trust documents. I started reading through the clauses I hadn't looked at in 3 years, double-checking the termination triggers, the exact wording of the life estate, the liability protections. Everything was ironclad. My lawyer had designed it specifically to protect the asset from predatory lenders, which ironically made it perfectly bulletproof against predatory family members. My phone vibrated on the table next to my coffee cup. I looked at the screen. It wasn't Mom. It wasn't Ashley. It wasn't Uncle Ryan. It was Grandpa. I stared at the name blinking on the screen. My stomach tightened. I had spent 3 years protecting this man's pride, lying to his face, letting him tell me stories about how he negotiated down the bank manager to save his house. I had swallowed his passive-aggressive comments about how my generation didn't understand the value of hard work and property ownership. I swiped to answer and brought the phone to my ear. "Hello," I said. Silence on the other end. Just the heavy, raspy sound of his breathing. "Grandpa, you humiliated me," he said. His voice was entirely unrecognizable. It wasn't the booming, confident baritone he used at family gatherings. It was thin, reedy, and vibrating with rage. "I told the truth," I said softly, looking out at the snow. Ashley backed me into a corner. I couldn't sit there and let her parade me around as a joke anymore. "You made me look like a fool in my own house. It's not your house." The words slipped out before I could stop them, cold and precise. I closed my eyes, instantly regretting it, but the damage was done. "There it is," Gramp spat, his voice trembling. "The truth comes out. You've been lording this over me for 3 years. Every time you came to visit, sitting in my living room, drinking my beer. You were looking at me like a pathetic old beggar. That is not true, I said, my voice rising slightly. I kept it down, aware of the few businessmen eating eggs a few tables away. I never brought it up. I never asked for a dime. I set up the trust so you would never have to worry about the county or the bank ever again. I did it because I love you. If you loved me, you would have given me the money to pay the taxes myself. You wouldn't have put my home in some secret corporate file with your name on it. If I gave you the money directly, the reverse mortgage company would have seized it as an asset, I said, rubbing the bridge of my nose, fighting the headache blooming behind my eyes. We had to do it this way to protect the property. The lawyer explained this to you 3 years ago. I didn't understand the lawyer, he snapped. I was terrified. I was losing my mind thinking I was going to be sleeping in my truck. You put a stack of papers in front of me and told me it was the only way to save the cabin. I trusted you, and I saved the cabin. You stole my legacy, he shouted, the phone peaking and crackling. That house was supposed to go to your mother, and to Ryan, and to Ashley. It was supposed to be the family's anchor. Now it's just yours. It's a life estate, I repeated, the exhaustion making my words heavy. It stays in the trust. You live there forever. When you pass, the trust instructions clearly state that the property can be sold, and the proceeds, after the $114,000 I put in is recouped, are divided equally among the family. You would know that if you or Ashley actually read past the first page of the document last night. There was a long pause on the line. The heavy breathing stopped for a moment. Grandpa asked, his voice suddenly smaller. Page 12, section 4, I said, pulling up the PDF on my laptop and scrolling down. Upon the termination of the life estate, the trustee shall liquidate the asset. After the initial capital injection of $114,250 is returned to the grantor, the remaining net proceeds shall be distributed in equal shares to the surviving descendants. Mom, Ryan, Ashley, Mark, all of them. They all get their cut. I made sure of it. I listened to the silence. I could picture him sitting in his kitchen, the sunlight bouncing off the snow outside his window, the phone pressed against his ear. Did Ashley read that part to you last night? I asked. No, Grandpa whispered. She just said you owned it outright, that you could sell it tomorrow and keep everything. Of course she did. I leaned back against the vinyl booth. She needed a villain so she didn't have to look at herself in the mirror. I need it back in my name, Grandpa said. I frowned, staring at the screen of my laptop. What? I understand what you did. I do. But I can't live like this. I can't live knowing my grandson is my landlord. I need the deed back in my name. I'll take out a new mortgage. I'll pay you back your $114,000. I have equity in the house now. I can get a loan. Grandpa, you are 80 years old. No bank is going to give you a traditional mortgage, and you barely escaped a reverse mortgage last time. The interest rates will bury you. I don't care, he said, and the stubborn, prideful edge was back in his voice, sharper than ever. I will not be a charity case. You call your lawyer tomorrow. You dissolve this trust, and you put the title back in my name. If you don't, I will join Ashley's lawsuit. I will stand up in court and swear under oath that you coerced me into signing those papers. I stopped breathing for a second. The ambient noise of the hotel lobby faded away. I stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. You would perjure yourself, I said softly. You would risk going to jail and destroying my life just for your pride. A man's home is his castle, Grandpa said, his voice cold and resolute. You took my castle. I want it back. If I dissolve the trust, I said, my voice shaking slightly with a mix of profound sadness and rising anger, the protection evaporates. Do you understand that? The property becomes an unprotected asset in your name. I know how property works, he snapped. Then you also know that any other outstanding debts you have will instantly attach to the house as a lien. Silence again. But this time it felt different. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the tight, suffocating silence of a trapped animal. Grandpa, I said, my eyes narrowing at the hotel window. Is there something else? He didn't answer. When we did the background check for the trust 3 years ago, we only looked at the county tax records and the mortgage. I said, my mind racing, putting the pieces together. We didn't run a full personal credit check because we were moving too fast to beat the auction. Grandpa, what else do you owe? Nothing, he quickly. Too quickly. Don't lie to me. Not right now. I closed my laptop. If I dissolve this trust and put the deed in your name, what is going to happen? I heard him swallow hard over the phone. There was a medical issue, he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. 5 years ago, before Medicare kicked in properly, I had that heart flutter. They kept me in the hospital for 2 weeks. The bill was substantial. How substantial? $80,000, he whispered. I put it on credit cards to stop them from coming after the house. Then the interest started. I took out personal loans to pay the credit cards. The loans defaulted. I closed my eyes and pressed the heels of my hands against my forehead. There's a judgment against me, he confessed, his voice breaking. A collection agency out of Chicago. They've been trying to find an asset to attach it to for 2 years. But every time they run my social security number, it shows I don't own any real property. Because of your trust. I sat perfectly still. The coffee in my cup had gone completely cold. No. Does Ashley know about this? I asked. Nobody knows, Grandpa said, weeping softly into the phone. Nobody. If I put the house back in your name, the collection agency's automated system will flag the property transfer within 30 days. They will slap a lien on the cabin for the original debt plus 5 years of compound interest and legal fees. It will probably be over $200,000. They will force a sale. I know, he choked out. Then why in God's name are you asking me to dissolve the trust? Because Ashley is going to find out, he yelled, the sound echoing through the hotel dining room. A few heads turned in my direction. She's hiring a forensic accountant. Greg's brother is pulsing my financial records. If they audit me for this lawsuit, they're going to see the judgments. They're going to see that I'm bankrupt. They're going to see that I ruined the family. I can't let them see that. I'd rather lose the house. I stared out the window of the hotel dining room, watching the snow pile up on the hood of a shuttle bus, my mind completely stalling out on the sheer, toxic scale of what he was saying. You would rather be homeless, I said, my voice dropping to a flat, emotionless register. You would rather freeze in your truck at 80 years old than let Ashley and Greg know you aren't the king of the mountain. They respect me, he sobbed, the sound wet wet and pathetic over the phone. I am the patriarch of this family. If they see those filings, if they see the collections, Ashley will look at me the way she looks at Ryan. Like a failure, like a burden. I won't survive that. So you'll just let the Chicago agency seize the cabin, and you'll tell Ashley what? That I sold it out from under you? You'll use me as the scapegoat to hide your debts? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The heavy, ragged silence was a complete confession. He had already justified it in his head. I was the runaway. I was the one who moved to Seattle and didn't come to Sunday dinners. It would be so easy for him to just lean into Ashley's narrative, to let me be the villain, as long as it meant he didn't have to admit he was broke. You're a coward, I said. The line clicked dead. I slowly lowered the phone and set it on the vinyl table next to my cold coffee. My stomach churned, a sour mix of hotel buffet eggs and pure adrenaline. I closed my laptop, slid it into my backpack, and went back up to my room. I needed to call my lawyer, David. It was Saturday morning, but I paid his firm enough over the years that I had his personal cell. Before I could even pull up his contact, my phone chimed in my hand, a text message from an unknown Denver number. It's Greg, we need to talk. No wives, no family, no lawyers yet, just you and me. I'm at the Starbucks on Tower Road, 10 minutes from your hotel. Come now or I make the call to my brother. I stared at the screen. The sheer arrogance of it was staggering. Greg had been married to my sister for 6 years. In all that time, we had probably exchanged less than 100 words. He was a guy who wore tailored Patagonia vests, bought a new luxury SUV every 2 years, and talked about his golf handicap at Thanksgiving. I had always written him off as just another self-important suburban dentist. I grabbed my jacket and my keys. The drive took exactly 8 minutes. The roads were slick with fresh snow, and the sky was a bruised, heavy gray. I pulled the Tahoe into the strip mall parking lot and spotted Greg's white Range Rover immediately. It was parked diagonally across 2 spaces near the front door. I walked inside. The heat hit me, thick with the smell of roasted espresso and wet boots. Greg was sitting in a leather armchair in the corner, a venti cup in front of him. He was wearing a dark wool pea coat over a crisp, button-down shirt, looking like he was about to step into board meeting rather than a family crisis. I walked over and sat down on the small wooden stool across from him. I didn't take my jacket off. Glad you could make it, Greg said, leaning forward and resting his elbows on his knees. He gave me a tight, practiced smile, the kind of smile he probably gave patients right before handing them a massive bill for Invisalign. What do you want, Greg? I want to de-escalate, he said smoothly. Last night got out of hand. Ashley is emotional. Your grandfather is emotional. Your mom is a wreck. I'm a practical guy. I look at this situation. I see a lot of unnecessary drama over a simple real estate dispute. There is no dispute. The trust holds the deed. The terms are ironclad. Nothing is ironclad, Greg countered, waving a hand dismissively. My brother is a partner at Vance & Sterling. He looked at the pictures Ashley took of the documents. He says a life estate established under these circumstances. An elderly man, financial duress, no independent counsel present for him at signing, is highly vulnerable to an elder abuse claim. If we file an injunction on Monday, we tie that property up in probate court for the next 5 years. You won't be able to sell it. You won't be able to borrow against it, and you'll bleed tens of thousands in legal fees. And Grandpa will be forced to testify, I said, watching his eyes. He's ready to, Greg said without missing a beat. He told us this morning he didn't understand what he was signing. He'll swear to it in front of a judge. My jaw tightened. He really was going to do it. Grandpa was going to perjure himself and destroy me just to keep his secret. So why am I here, Greg? If you hold all the cards, file the injunction. Greg leaned back, lacing his fingers together. Because litigation is messy, and like I said, I'm practical. I know what that property is worth. The land alone, right on the edge of the national park, is appraised at $2.2 million. You put in 114 grand. That's a hell of a return on investment, but it's fundamentally unfair to Ashley and Ryan. The trust clearly states the proceeds are split equally when he dies, I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. Ashley gets her cut. Ashley gets a fraction eventually, Greg corrected. But let's be honest about the current situation. Your grandfather is 80. He's failing. The property needs maintenance. The taxes are going up, and holding it in a trust doesn't benefit anyone right now. I have a proposal. He reached into his peacoat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the small round table. I didn't touch it. I just looked at him. I will buy your position as the trustee, Greg said. I will write you a cashier's check on Monday morning for $250,000. You double your initial investment, you walk away clean, and you don't have to deal with the family or the lawsuit ever again. I take over the trust, I manage the property, and everyone is happy. I stared at him, the pieces rapidly clicking into place. This wasn't about elder abuse. This wasn't about Ashley feeling slighted. This was about Greg. You want to control the asset, I said. I want to protect the family legacy, Greg corrected, perfectly calm. No, you want the equity, I said, leaning forward. Why do you need the equity, Greg? Your dental practice not doing as well as you tell everyone at Thanksgiving. You leveraged too high on the Range Rover and the house in Cherry Creek? A tiny muscle ticked in Greg's jaw. The practice smile faltered for a fraction of a second. My finances are none of your business, he said coldly. They are when you're trying to extort me for a $2 million property. I shot back. If you take over the trust, you can dissolve it, put the deed in Grandpa's name, and have him take out a massive reverse mortgage or a line of credit with you as the co-signer. You pull the cash out, the house is leveraged to the hilt, and when he dies, the bank takes it and Ashley gets nothing anyway. You're trying to use his house as an ATM. I am offering you a generous buyout to avoid a brutal legal fight, Greg said, his voice dropping, the friendly facade completely vanishing. Take the money, go back to Seattle, be the runaway, it's what you're good at. And if I say no, then my brother files the paperwork at 9 a.m. Monday. We freeze the trust. We subpoena your bank records. We depose your grandfather. Drag this out until you are so drowning in legal fees you'll be begging to settle for half of what I'm offering you right now. I sat back in my chair. The trap was perfectly set, and it was tightening from both sides. If I let Greg audit Grandpa for the lawsuit, Greg would find the $200,000 collection agency judgment against him. The moment Greg saw that, he would realize realized Grandpa was financially radioactive. He wouldn't want the house anymore, but the damage would be done. The collection agency would be alerted by the legal filings, they would seize the property, and Grandpa would be homeless. And if I dissolved the trust right now to give it back to Grandpa like he wanted, the exact same thing would happen. I had to protect Grandpa from his own stupidity, and I had to protect the house from Greg's greed, but I couldn't tell Greg why without blowing Grandpa's secret and destroying him anyway. I reached out and picked up the folded piece of paper. It was a drafted letter of intent, printed on Vance and Sterling letterhead, outlining the $250,000 buyout. Greg had already had his brother drafted up. They had been planning this since last night. While Ashley was screaming at me in the driveway, Greg was calculating the equity. I slowly ripped the paper in half. Greg didn't blink. He just watched me. I put the two halves together and ripped them again, dropping the shredded pieces into the puddle of condensation next to his coffee cup. You don't understand what you're dealing with, I said quietly. I think I understand perfectly, Greg said, standing up and buttoning his pea coat. You're arrogant, but arrogance doesn't hold up in probate court. I'll see you on Monday. He walked out of the Starbucks, leaving me sitting alone at the table. I watched through the glass as he got into his Range Rover, the exhaust pluming white in the freezing air, and drove away. I pulled my phone out. I had to call David. I didn't care what he was doing this weekend. I dialed the number and put the phone to my ear, listening to the rings. This is David, a gruff voice answered on the fourth ring. David, it's me. I have a massive problem. It's Saturday, kid. This better be a real problem and not just family drama. My brother-in-law is a dentist who thinks he's a real estate mogul. He's hiring Vance and Sterling to file an injunction on Monday morning to break the Estes Park Trust. He's claiming elder abuse and coercion. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I heard the sound of a lighter flicking and then a heavy exhale. Vance and Sterling, David said, his tone shifting instantly from annoyed to dead serious. You're sure? He just handed me a letter of intent on their letterhead. He offered to buy me out for $250 to make the lawsuit go away. I tore it up. Okay, listen to me, David said, his voice tight. Vance and Sterling aren't strip mall lawyers. They are a heavy-hitter corporate litigation firm in Denver. If they are taking this on, it means they smell blood, and they smell money. If they file an injunction, the judge will freeze the asset immediately. I know. But that's not the worst part. I swallowed hard, looking at the ripped paper on the table. Grandpa called me this morning. He has a hidden judgment against him. A medical debt that went to a collection agency in Chicago 5 years ago. It's over $200,000 with interest. The only reason they haven't attached a lien to the cabin is because the blind trust shields it from his social security number. David swore loudly into the phone. Jesus Christ. Are you kidding me? If Vance and Sterling file for discovery, I said, they are going to run a deep forensic financial check on him to prove his state of mind and financial vulnerability. They will hit that Chicago judgment in 10 seconds. The moment that judgment becomes part of a public court record, the collection agency's algorithms will flag it. They will intervene in the lawsuit, assert their claim, and force a liquidation of the property to cover the debt. And your grandfather loses the house. David finished the thought. Does your brother-in-law know about the medical debt? No. He thinks the equity is free and clear. If I tell him, he walks away. But Grandpa's secret is out, and the family implodes. Grandpa said he'd rather lose the house than let Ashley know he's bankrupt. Your family is a goddamn nightmare, David muttered. Tell me how we stop Vance and Sterling from filing on Monday. We can't, David said bluntly. Anyone can file anything. We can fight it, and we will probably win eventually, because the trust is solid. But the discovery process is mandatory. Once they file, we have to produce records, and they get to dig. We can't stop them from finding the Chicago debt. I rubbed my eyes, the exhaustion pulling at my bones. So what do I do? You have 48 hours to figure out how to make a Denver litigation partner back off a $2 million asset, David said. I'll start drafting a defensive response. But I'm telling you right now, legally, we are walking into a minefield. You need to find leverage on your brother-in-law, and you need to find it fast, or that cabin is gone. I dropped the phone onto the bed and stared at the blank wall of the Marriott room. Leverage. I'm a software architect. My entire career is built on the premise that no system is flawless. If you dig deep enough, if you look past the polished user interface, you will always find a vulnerability, a broken line of code, a back door someone forgot to lock. Greg was a system. He was a guy obsessed with optics, status, and control. Guys like that don't just offer you $250,000 on a Saturday morning out of the goodness of their hearts. And they definitely don't rush to buy an asset tied up in a messy radioactive family dispute, unless they are drowning and need a life raft. I opened my laptop and connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. Public records in Colorado are surprisingly easy to access if you know where to look and don't mind paying a few processing fees. I pulled out my wallet, grabbed my credit card, and bought a 24-hour access pass to the Colorado Judicial Branch's public docket system. I typed in his name, Gregory Allen Harrison. I sifted through the noise first. 2 speeding tickets from 2019, a minor civil dispute with a landscaping company that was dismissed in mediation. Nothing useful. I switched my search parameters. I looked up his business entity with the Secretary of State, Harrison Orthodontics LLC. I took that LLC name and plugged it back into the court docket. Hit Denver County District Court. Filed 4 months ago. Apex Commercial Property Management versus Harrison Orthodontics LLC and Gregory Harrison. I paid the extra $12 to download the PDF of the initial complaint and the latest rulings. I opened the file, skimming past the heavy legal boilerplate until I found the meat of the lawsuit. Last year, Greg had signed a 10-year commercial lease on a 4,000 square foot space in a luxury high-rise in Loudoun. The plan was clearly a second, high-end clinic, but according to the filings, he had stopped paying rent midway through the expensive custom build-out. Apex sued him for breach of contract and triggered the acceleration clause. They were coming after him for the entire remaining value of the 10-year lease, $850,000, plus attorney's fees. But the real kill shot was buried on page 4. Greg hadn't just signed the lease under his LLC. He had signed a personal guarantee. The corporate veil wouldn't protect him. Apex could come directly for his personal assets, his bank accounts, his cars, his house in Cherry Creek. I scrolled down to the most recent entry, last Tuesday, 4 days ago. The judge had granted a summary judgment in favor of Apex. Greg had officially lost. He owed them nearly $1 million, and the clock was ticking before the property management company started filing liens to seize everything he owned. That was why he needed the cabin. He was desperate for a clean, unencumbered $2 million asset he could borrow against to pay off the judgment before Apex moved in, and Ashley found out they were broke. He was trying to do the exact same thing Grandpa did. He was trying to hide his financial ruin from his family to protect his ego, and he was willing to bulldoze me to do it. I let out a harsh, empty laugh. The symmetry was almost poetic. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Greg. Not yet. I wanted to see exactly how isolated he was. I found Mark's number from the text he sent the night before and hit call. Mark answered on the second ring. He sounded exhausted. Hey, I didn't think you'd call back. Mark, you still run your contracting business? Yeah, why? Did Greg ever talk to you about doing the build-out for a second clinic in Lodu? Silence on the line. Then cautious. How do you know about that? I know it went completely sideways, I said. I need to know what you know. Mark let out a heavy sigh. He brought me in to bid on the HVAC and plumbing last August. It was a massive job. High-end finishes, stupidly expensive imported dental chairs. I gave him a fair number, and he told me I was trying to rip off family. He went with some cut-rate outfit out of Aurora instead. Did they finish the job? No, Mark said. The Aurora guys walked off the site in October because Greg bounced 2 milestone checks. The landlord got pissed because the space was gutted. Greg couldn't secure the financing to finish it, and he couldn't open for business to pay the rent. I heard through the grapevine the landlord locked him out in January. Does Ashley know? Are you kidding? Mark snorted. Ashley was bragging at Thanksgiving about how well the practice was doing. She just bought that new Range Rover in December. If she knew Greg was bouncing checks to drywallers, she'd have a meltdown. Thanks. Why are you asking about this? What's going on? Greg is trying to steal Grandpa's cabin to pay off $1 million lawsuit he lost on Tuesday. Mark didn't say anything for a long time. Then he just muttered, Jesus Christ, don't tell anyone I said. Not yet. I hung up. I had the leverage. Now I needed to apply it. I opened a new text message to Greg. Apex Commercial Property Management. $850K summary judgment on Tuesday. I have the PDF. Come back to the hotel. I hit send. I watched the screen. The little read receipt popped up almost instantly. 10 seconds passed. 20. The phone rang. It was Greg. I answered and put it on speaker, setting it down on the desk next to my laptop. Didn't take you long. He didn't sound smooth anymore. He sounded like he was hyperventilating slightly. You accessed sealed court documents. That's a federal crime. Civil dockets aren't sealed, Greg. They're public record for anyone with a credit card and 20 minutes to kill. You lost an $850,000 judgment 4 days ago. You signed a personal guarantee. They're going to take your house. They're going to take your practice. Shut up, he hissed. Just shut up. You don't have $250,000 to buy me out, I said, leaning back in the hotel chair, staring out at the snow. You were never going to write me a cashier's check on Monday. You were bluffing to get me to hand over the trust so you could use the cabin as collateral for a high-risk loan. I can get the money, Greg said, his voice tight, frantic. I have investors. I just need time. You're bankrupt, Greg, and you're trying to strip an 80-year-old man of his only home to cover your own massive incompetence. He's 80, Greg yelled, abandoning the whisper, his voice echoing loudly out of the small phone speaker. He's going to die in a few years anyway. That equity is just sitting there rotting while I lose everything I've built. It's not fair. Fair? I asked, my voice dropping to a dead, icy calm. You stood in that living room last night and let Ashley humiliate me for saving this family. You sat in that Starbucks an hour ago and threatened to tie me up in probate court. And now you want to talk about fair? What do you want? He asked. The fight was gone. He just sounded hollowed out. You want me to drop the injunction? I want you to call your brother, I said. Right now. I want you to tell him the lawsuit is off. And then I want you to go home and tell Ashley the truth. I can't tell Ashley, Greg whispered, his voice cracking. She'll leave me. That's not my problem. She'll leave me, he repeated, sounding suddenly very small. She married a successful doctor. She didn't marry a guy with $1 million judgment hanging over his neck. If I tell her we're losing the house, she'll pack her bags tonight. If you don't call your brother and cancel the injunction, I said, my tone absolute, I will call Ashley myself. I will send her the PDF of the court order. I will send it to Mom. I will send it to Ryan, to Mark, to everyone who was in that cabin last night. I will show them exactly who the real parasite in this family is. Silence. Just the sound of his ragged breathing over the phone line. You have 5 minutes, I said. Call your brother. Forward me the email confirmation from his firm that they are standing down. If I don't have it by the time the clock hits 12:30, I hit send on the group chat. I ended the call. I sat there watching the digital clock on the hotel microwave. 12:26, 12:27, 12:28. My stomach was in knots. I had him cornered, but cornered people do stupid things. If he called my bluff, if he decided his ego couldn't take the hit and chose to take me down with him, he could still file on Monday. He could still trigger the audit that would expose Grandpa's medical debt. 12:29. My phone buzzed. A forwarded email from Greg. Subject free. Harrison Trust injunction. Stopped work. I opened it. It was from a senior partner at Vance and Sterling, acknowledging Greg's frantic request to immediately cease all legal action regarding the Estes Parks property and closing the client file. I let out a long, shaky breath and rubbed my face. The Monday deadline was dead. The cabin was safe. Grandpa's secret medical debt would stay buried in Chicago. I closed my laptop and walked over to the window, watching a snowplow scrape the asphalt in the hotel parking lot. I felt completely drained. The adrenaline was leaving my system, replaced by a deep, aching fatigue. It was over. I had contained the blast radius. My phone vibrated on the desk behind me. I turned around. An incoming call. I looked at the screen. It was Ashley. I stared at it. The injunction was stopped, but the family fallout was far from over. Greg might have backed down on the legal threat, but Ashley was still out for blood over the humiliation at the party. I picked up the phone and swiped to answer. Hello, Ashley. Where are you? She asked. Her voice was completely different from last night. It wasn't feral. It wasn't loud. It wasn't the smug tone she used by the fireplace. It was quiet, thin, trembling. I'm at the airport Marriott, I said carefully. Greg just came home, she said. I could hear the faint sound of a door clicking shut in the background, like she had just locked herself in a bathroom. He walked through the front door, didn't say a word to me, went straight into his home office, and locked the door. Okay, I said, unsure of where this was going. His iPad was still unlocked on the kitchen counter, she whispered. Her voice hitched, a sharp intake of air that sounded painfully close to a sob. He gets his text messages forwarded to it. I froze. I saw the message you sent him, she said, her words coming out fast and ragged. The one about Apex Commercial Property Management. The one about an $850,000 judgment. She sniffled, a wet, raw sound that stripped away 32 years of sibling rivalry in an instant. I googled it, she choked out. I looked it up on the county website. We owe $1 million. He put our house up as a guarantee. Why did my husband put our house up? And why are you the one who knows about it? Because, I said, leaning my forehead against the cold glass of the hotel window, he was trying to steal Grandpa's cabin to pay it off. There was absolute silence on the line, just the faint, hollow hum of the connection and the muffled sound of Ashley's breathing. What are you talking about? She whispered. Greg lost a summary judgment on Tuesday, Ashley. The landlord for his new Lodo clinic sued him for breach of contract. He stopped paying rent because he ran out of money for the build-out. He bounced milestone checks to the contractors, including Mark. He screwed our own cousin out of his labor. The landlord locked him out, sued him for the balance of the 10-year lease, and won. Greg signed a personal guarantee. They're coming for your house in Cherry Creek. They're coming for the practice. He's bankrupt. No, she said, but it wasn't a denial. It was the sound of someone watching a car crash happen in slow motion. No, he told me the Lodo clinic was delayed because of city permitting issues. He just bought me the Range Rover for Christmas. He bought that to keep up appearances so nobody would look too closely at his cash flow. He's drowning, Ashley. And last night, when you decided to put on a show and hand me that plastic trophy, you handed him a lifeline. The cabin, she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of all the usual superiority. The math was doing itself in her head. The cabin, I confirmed. The land is appraised at over $2 million. It's unencumbered because the trust holds the deed, and I paid off the tax liens. When Greg found out about the trust, he didn't care about elder abuse. He didn't care about your inheritance. He realized that if he could break my trust, he could put the deed back in Grandpa's name, manipulate him into signing a massive high-interest loan against the equity, and use the cash to pay off his $1 million judgment. He was going to use Grandpa's house to save himself, she said, her voice shaking. And when Grandpa eventually died, the bank would foreclose on the cabin, the family legacy would be gone, and you and I would get absolutely nothing. That was his plan. He had his brother draft up a letter of intent this morning, offering to buy me out of the trust for $250,000. He tried to extort me to walk away. I heard a sharp, awful sound over the phone. It took me a second to realize it was Ashley dropping the iPad onto the granite kitchen counter. Ashley? Hold on, she said. The phone rustled. I heard her footsteps, heavy and fast, echoing on hardwood floors. She was walking down the hallway of her massive, heavily mortgaged house. Greg, she yelled. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was guttural. I heard a heavy fist pounding on a solid wood door of the office. Greg, open the goddamn door. I sat down on the edge of the hotel bed, keeping the phone pressed to my ear. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel the rush of victory I thought I would. I just felt a deep, hollow exhaustion. I was listening to a marriage end in real time on a Saturday afternoon in a cheap Marriott. Ashley, calm down. I heard Greg's muffled voice through the door. He sounded panicked. Open the door, or I am calling the police and telling them you locked yourself in with a weapon, she screamed. The lock clicked. The door opened. Ashley, listen to me. Apex Commercial Property Management, she shrieked, her voice peeking the microphone on my phone. $850,000. You put a personal guarantee on this house? Where did you see that? Greg demanded, his tone instantly shifting from defensive to vicious. Have you been going through my iPad? Have you been reading my emails? Your phone forwarded a text from my brother, the brother you just tried to rob. He's lying, Greg yelled back. He's trying to deflect because I caught him stealing your grandfather's property. He's a manipulator, Ashley. You know this. He's the one who ran away to Seattle. He's the one who... I looked it up on the county docket, you absolute piece of shit, she roared. The sound of something shattering echoed loudly, a glass or a picture frame hitting the wall. I read the summary judgment. The judge ruled on Tuesday. You owe them almost $1 million, and you used our home as collateral without telling me. There was a long, terrible pause. I could picture them standing in that meticulously decorated home office, the reality of their entire life collapsing around them. I was going to fix it, Greg said. His voice was suddenly very quiet. The bluster was gone. I just needed a bridge loan. The practice is still generating revenue. If I could just clear the immediate judgment with Apex, we could restructure. I was going to fix it before you ever had to know. By stealing my grandfather's house? He's 80 years old, Ashley. What does he need $2 million in equity for? It's just sitting there. Your brother hijacked it for a fraction of what it's worth. I was going to leverage it, pay off Apex, and then pay the loan back through the practice over the next 10 years. Nobody would have gotten hurt. You bounced checks to my cousin Mark, she said, her voice dropping to a toxic, venomous whisper. You treated him like garbage at Thanksgiving, and you were bouncing checks to him. Mark is a small-time contractor. He doesn't understand corporate cash flow. Get out, Ashley. Be reasonable. Get out of my house, she screamed. Pack a bag and get the hell out of my house right now. It's my house too, Greg snapped, his pride finally flaring up. My name is on the mortgage. Not for long, since the property management company is going to seize it, she said bitterly. Get out, Greg. If you aren't gone in 10 minutes, I'm calling my mother, I'm calling your parents, and I'm telling everyone in our country club exactly why you lost the Lodo clinic. I heard heavy footsteps, a door, slamming, and then the sound of Ashley crying. It wasn't the performative crying she used to do when we were kids to get me in trouble. It was raw, ugly, hyperventilating sobs. She picked the phone back up. Are you still there? She choked out. I'm here, I said softly. He's packing, she whispered, her breath hitching.
No, Joshua,
He's actually packing a bag. I'm sorry, Ashley. Don't, she snapped, though there was no real heat behind it. Don't pity me. I can't take that right now, not from you. She blew her nose. I listened to the sound of a zipper being aggressively pulled shut somewhere in the background of her house. Last night, she said, her voice trembling, at the party, I stood up in front of the whole family and I called you a parasite. I handed you that stupid plastic award. You did, and Greg was standing right behind me, clapping. She let out a wet, bitter laugh that sounded like a cough. He let me humiliate you. He let me make a complete fool of myself, pretending we were the saviors of the family, while he was already planning to use the chaos to steal the cabin. He needed a distraction. You gave him a perfect one. Why didn't you just tell me? She asked, the anger finally bleeding completely out of her, leaving only exhaustion. 3 years ago, when Mom called you about the taxes, why didn't you just tell me? We could have helped. No, you couldn't have, I said, keeping my voice gentle but firm. Even 3 years ago, Greg's finances were probably over-leveraged, and more importantly, Grandpa wouldn't have let you. What do you mean? Grandpa's pride is the most dangerous thing in this family, I told her. If he knew I paid it, he would have fought it. If he knew you paid it, he would have fought it. He would have rather lost the cabin to the county than admit to you that he failed. The only way to save the house was to do it blindly and legally lock it away from him, so he couldn't sabotage himself again. Ashley was quiet for a long moment. I heard the faint, heavy thud of the front door closing. Greg was gone. I have to call Mom, she said, her voice sounding hollowed out. I have to tell her what happened, and I have to call Grandpa and apologize to him for last night. I need to tell him what Greg tried to do. No, I said sharply, sitting up straight. You can't do that. Why not? They deserve to know the truth. Ashley, listen to me very carefully. You cannot tell Grandpa about Greg's bankruptcy, and you cannot tell him Greg was trying to leverage the house. Why? She demanded, a spark of her old defensiveness returning. Because you want to be the one to tell him? You want to be the hero again? Because if you tell Grandpa that his house was almost used to cover a massive secret debt, he is going to panic. And if he panics, he is going to do something stupid. Like what? The trust protects him. I closed my eyes, rubbing my temples. The headache behind my eyes was throbbing in time with my pulse. I had managed to neutralize Greg, but the blast radius was still expanding. Ashley, Grandpa called me this morning, I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. He demanded I dissolve the trust and put the deed back in his name. Why would he do that? Because he's terrified, I said, and not of Greg. He doesn't even know about Greg yet. Then what is he terrified of? I took a deep breath. I had spent 3 years keeping Grandpa's secrets, protecting his fragile ego, while the rest of the family treated me like a stranger, and all it had gotten me was a plastic trophy and a lawsuit threat. If I kept this secret now, Ashley would blunder right into it, and the house would be gone anyway. 5 years ago, I said, before his Medicare was properly sorted, Grandpa was in the hospital for 2 weeks with that heart issue. Do you remember? Yes, Ashley said slowly. He said insurance covered it. He lied. He owed $80,000. He put it on credit cards to hide it from the family, then took out personal loans to pay the cards, and then he defaulted on the loans. Oh my God, there is a $200,000 judgment against him from a collection agency in Chicago, I said. The only reason they haven't seized the cabin is because my blind trust shields the property from his social security number. The collection agency thinks he doesn't own anything. Ashley was dead silent. If you call him right now, I continued, and tell him that Greg, his golden son-in-law, just went bankrupt and tried to steal the house, Grandpa's pride is going to completely fracture. He is already terrified that the family is going to find out about his collections. If he thinks everyone's finances are being exposed, he will try to get ahead of it. He will hire some cheap local lawyer to try and break the trust himself just to prove he's still in control. And the second that deed touches his name, the Chicago agency will instantly slap a lien on the cabin and force a public auction. He's bankrupt too, Ashley whispered. The reality of it was settling heavily over the line. The invincible patriarch, the successful orthodontist husband, the two pillars of her perfectly curated life were made of rotting wood. The entire family is a house of cards, Ashley. Mom co-signs Uncle Ryan's condo because he hasn't held a job in 5 years. Greg leveraged your house to build a clinic he couldn't afford. Grandpa hit a massive medical debt because he couldn't stand looking weak. And I'm the one paying a commercial realist lawyer in Fort Collins to keep the county from kicking an 80-year-old man out into the snow. I didn't know, she said. Her voice broke completely. I swear to God, I didn't know about any of it. I know you didn't, I said, but you know now, so you need to listen to me. You are going to call Mom, and you are going to tell her that you and Greg are getting a divorce because of financial infidelity regarding his business. Keep it vague. Keep it contained. And Grandpa, you tell Grandpa that Greg had a stress breakdown about the clinic and left. You tell him Greg was wrong about the trust and that his house is safe. You let him keep his pride. You let him think his secret is still safe. I can't lie to him, she sobbed, not after everything. You have to, I said firmly. If you want that cabin to be there for Thanksgiving, you have to lie to him. Can you do that? She sniffled loudly, catching her breath. Yes, I can do it. Good. Call a divorce attorney on Monday morning. Be the first one to file. Protect your own bank accounts before Apex drains them. I have to go. Wait, she said quickly. I paused, holding the phone away from my ear, looking at the snow falling outside the hotel window. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just tapped the red button and ended the call. I sat in the quiet hotel room for a long time. The digital clock on the microwave clicked to 1:15 p.m. My flight back to Seattle wasn't until tomorrow morning. I had an entire afternoon to kill in a city I couldn't wait to leave. I grabbed my laptop off the desk, shoved it into my backpack, and threw my heavy jacket on. I needed to get out of the room. I needed to be anywhere but sitting that sterile silence. I took the elevator down to the lobby and walked out the sliding glass doors into the freezing Colorado air. The snow had stopped, leaving a blindingly bright, overcast glare reflecting off the asphalt. I walked to my rental Tahoe, climbed in, and started the engine. I didn't know where I was going. I just pointed the heavy SUV toward the highway and drove. I merged onto I-70 West, watching the foothills of the Rockies slowly rising in the distance, a massive wall of white and gray against the sky. My phone buzzed in the center console. I glanced down. It was David, my lawyer. I tapped the speaker button on the steering wheel. Hey David, you can call off the defensive filing. Greg is standing down. His firm sent the stop work order an hour ago. I saw the email, David said. His voice was grim, devoid of the relief I expected. That's great work on your end, but that's not why I'm calling. I frowned, keeping my eyes on the taillights of a semi-truck in the right lane. What's wrong? I was running routine back-end checks on the Estes Park deed this morning while drafting the response, David said, the sound of papers shuffling on his end of the line. Just making sure the county hadn't recorded any clerical errors since our last tax payment. And the county records are clean. The trust is perfectly intact, David said. He paused, taking a heavy breath. But I ran a secondary sweep on your grandfather's name through the state docket, just to see if that Chicago collection agency had made any aggressive moves recently. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Did they know, David said. The Chicago agency is dormant, but a new filing popped up in the Larimer County court system on Thursday afternoon. Three kind of filing. A quitclaim deed request, David said softly. Someone submitted paperwork to the county clerk attempting to transfer the title of the Estes Park cabin out of the blind trust. I hit the brakes slightly, the Tahoe shuddering. That's impossible. I'm the only trustee. I have to sign off on a quitclaim in front of a notary. I know, David said. I'm looking at the scanned PDF of the filing right now. It has your grandfather's signature as the requesting party. Grandpa tried to transfer the deed? I asked, my mind racing. To who? Back to himself? No, David said. Not to himself, then to who? To your Uncle Ryan. Uncle Ryan? I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Yes, David said, a quitclaim deed. It's a legal instrument used to quickly transfer interest in real property. But here's the kicker. It only transfers whatever interest the grantor actually holds. Since your grandfather only has a life estate, he can't transfer the title. He doesn't own it. The trust does. So it's useless, I said, my knuckles turning white against the steering wheel. Legally? Yes, it's garbage. The county clerk will reject it once it hits the final review desk because the title is held by the LLC we set up for the trust, and you are the sole trustee. But the fact that it was filed at all means two things. One, your grandfather is actively trying to bypass you, and two, your uncle put him up to it. I pulled the Tahoe onto the snowy shoulder of I-70, throwing it into park. Cars whipped past me, kicking up gray slush against my doors. Why Thursday? I asked, staring blankly at the dashboard. Excuse me? The filing. You said it was submitted on Thursday afternoon. That was the day before everyone started arriving at the cabin for the birthday party. Then they were trying to get it done before the family gathered, David said matter-of-factly. Look, I've seen this 100 times in probate and estate law. The Failson realizes he's getting older. He doesn't have a retirement plan, and he looks at the biggest asset in the family. He gets in the old man's ear. He tells him the trust is a trap. He tells him you're trying to steal the legacy. He plays on the paranoia, and Grandpa believed him. Of course he did, because believing your uncle meant he didn't have to admit he was wrong for getting into debt in the first place. Your uncle offered him a way to take back control without telling the rest of the family. The quitclaim deed was supposed to put the house in Ryan's name. Ryan probably promised to take out a new mortgage to pay off your grandfather's secret medical debt and keep the rest of the cash for himself. The pieces locked together with a sickening click. The text message from Ryan last night. We need to have a men's meeting about this tomorrow. Don't leave town. Ryan wasn't trying to play patriarch because he was shocked by Ashley's stunt. He was trying to do damage control. He thought his secret quitclaim deal was going to go through, and my sudden reveal with the tax receipts threatened to blow his entire grift wide open. I'll handle this, I said to David. Don't do anything stupid, David warned. We have the legal high ground. The house is safe. The trust is impenetrable. Let them flail. I'm not going to do anything stupid. I'm just going to have a conversation. I hung up. I checked my mirrors, waited for a gap in the traffic, and pulled the heavy SUV back onto the highway. But I didn't head toward the airport. I took the next exit, looped over the overpass, and merged onto I-25 south toward Aurora. Uncle Ryan lived in a beige, vinyl-sided condo complex that looked identical to every other cheap build from the late 90s. The parking lot was full of cars covered in a thick layer of untouched snow. Mom co-signed the mortgage on his unit 5 years ago after his third divorce. She paid half the monthly note out of her own meager retirement savings because she couldn't bear the thought of her brother being homeless. I parked the Tahoe in a visitor spot, killed the engine, and walked up the concrete stairs to the second floor. The air was biting cold. I stood in front of Unit 204. The welcome mat was faded and covered in road salt. I didn't knock. I pressed the doorbell and held it down for 10 solid seconds. I heard movement inside. The deadbolt clicked, the chain rattled, and the door opened a few inches. Ryan looked terrible. He was 58 but looked 10 years older. His face was puffy, his eyes bloodshot, and he was wearing a stained gray t-shirt and flannel pajama pants. The smell of stale weed and day-old coffee drifted out of the narrow opening. He blinked at me, surprised. Hey, I didn't think you'd come here. I thought we were going to meet at a diner or something. Open the door, Ryan. He hesitated, reading the tone of my voice, then unhooked the chain and swung the door open. I walked past him into the small living room. It was cluttered with empty Amazon boxes, old mail, and a massive, expensive-looking curved television mounted on the wall. The TV was paused on a YouTube video about cryptocurrency day trading. Look, about last night, Ryan started, rubbing his face. Ashley was out of line. We all know that. I wanted to talk to you about how we handle her moving forward because... Save it, I interrupted. I turned around and faced him. I know about the quitclaim deed. Ryan stopped rubbing his face. His hand slowly dropped to his side. The lingering effects of whatever he drank last night seemed to evaporate instantly, replaced by a rigid, panicked stillness. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. It was a weak lie. He couldn't even make eye contact. A quitclaim deed filed with the Larimer County clerk on Thursday afternoon, I said, stepping closer to him, requesting the transfer of the Estes Park property out of the trust and directly into your name, forged without my signature. You took an 80-year-old man to a notary and had him sign over a $2 million property that he doesn't even own. Ryan swallowed hard. He looked at the front door, like he was calculating if he could just walk out of his own apartment and avoid this. He wanted to do it, Ryan said, his voice dropping to a defensive mumble. It was his idea. Don't lie to me, Ryan. Grandpa doesn't even know what a quitclaim deed is. You found out about the trust. How? He backed up until the back of his legs hit a cheap faux leather recliner. He collapsed into it, looking up at me with a pathetic, cornered expression. I saw a piece of mail, he admitted, his voice cracking. A few months ago, I was at the cabin helping him fix the water heater. There was a tax assessment notice on the kitchen counter. It didn't have his name on it. It had the name of the blind trust. I asked him about it, and he told you. He broke down, Ryan said, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. He told me about the taxes. He told me about you paying them off. But he said you tricked him. He said you brought all these legal papers and forced him to sign them when he was confused. And now you owned his house. And you believed him. Why wouldn't I? Ryan shot back, a flash of genuine anger in his eyes. You left, remember? You went off to Seattle to make your tech money, and you barely call your own mother. Suddenly you swoop in, drop $100 grand, and put the family estate in a corporate file with only your name on it? It looked exactly like you were stealing it. So instead of calling me, instead of asking your sister, you decided to play lawyer and steal it yourself. I was protecting him, Ryan yelled. He was terrified, man. He thought you were going to kick him out and sell the place to developers. I told him we could reverse it. I found a paralegal online who drew up the quitclaim paperwork for $300. We were just trying to put the house back in the family's hands. I stared at him, disgusted. You weren't trying to put it in the family's hands. You were trying to put it in your hands. The deed you filed transferred the property solely to you. Not Mom, not Ashley, you. Ryan looked down at his dirty socks. I was going to hold it in trust for everyone. Bullshit. I took another step toward him, towering over the recliner. You don't have a job, Ryan. Your mother pays for this apartment. You couldn't afford the property taxes on that cabin for a single year. You weren't going to hold it. You were going to leverage it. He didn't say anything. The silence in the messy condo was heavy and suffocating. How much did you promise him? I asked quietly. Ryan flinched. I know Grandpa has a secret $200,000 medical debt in collections, I said. Ryan's head snapped up, his eyes wide. He hadn't expected me to know that. I know he's terrified of Ashley finding out. So what was the pitch, Ryan? What did you tell him you were going to do once the house was in your name? I have a guy, Ryan mumbled, his spirit completely broken. A guy. A developer out of Boulder, Ryan said, the words spilling out fast now, like a confession. I met him at a bar a few months ago. He buys up plots bordering the national park, subdivides them, and builds luxury eco-cabins for short-term rentals. He looked at the aerial maps of Grandpa's lot. He said the back 3 acres are totally usable. He offered me $800,000 cash for the back half of the lot. I let out a harsh, disbelieving breath. You were going to sell off the family land to a stranger building airbems. It was the perfect plan, Ryan insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. I take the deed. I subdivide the lot. We sell the back 3 acres. I pay off Grandpa's medical debt so he doesn't have to live in fear anymore. He keeps the main cabin and the front acreage. Nobody else in the family ever has to know he was broke. And what about the rest of the money? I asked. $800,000 minus Grandpa's $200,000 debt leaves $600 grand. Where was that going? Ryan licked his dry lips. He looked at the paused YouTube video about day trading. I needed capital, he whispered. I have a business plan, a real one this time. I was going to pay Mom back for the condo. I was going to get back on my feet. You were going to gamble it on crypto, I said. The absolute absurdity of the situation washing over me. It's not gambling. It's an algorithm. I've been studying it for. You manipulated an 80-year-old man into committing real estate fraud so you could day trade his inheritance, I said, cutting him off completely. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Ryan sank deeper into the chair. He looked like a deflated balloon. Grandpa knew, Ryan said softly. Don't act like he's an innocent victim in this. I told him I needed half the money to set myself up. He agreed to it. He signed the papers willingly. He wanted you out of the picture just as much as I did, because every time he looked at you, he remembered that he failed. That hit me harder than anything Ashley had said at the party. Ashley was just ignorant and mean. Greg was a predator backed into a corner. But Grandpa had sat in his leather recliner, laughing at Ashley's joke about me being a parasite, knowing full well he had already signed paperwork 2 days prior to strip me of the property and hand it over to the son who had never worked a hard day in his life. He hated me for saving him. He hated me for knowing his secret. The clerk is going to reject the quitclaim deed on Monday, I told Ryan, my voice hollow. The trust holds the title. You can't override it. Your little scheme is dead. Ryan just nodded slowly. He didn't even have the energy to argue anymore. Does anyone else know? I asked. Does Mom know? No, Ryan said. Just me and the old man. I turned around and walked toward the door. I didn't want to be in this room a second longer. I felt dirty just breathing the air. What are you going to do? Ryan called out from the recliner as I put my hand on the doorknob. I stopped. I didn't look back at him. Nothing, I said. Nothing? You're not going to tell Ashley? You're not going to tell Mom? Ashley is filing for divorce tomorrow because Greg is secretly bankrupt and tried to steal the cabin too, I said. I heard Ryan gasp behind me, but I didn't stop. I opened the door. Stay away from Grandpa, I said, stepping out onto the cold concrete landing. If you try to file anything else, if you try to take out a loan, if you even talk to that developer in Boulder again, I will have David bury you in civil litigation until you can't afford the electricity in this condo. And then I'll tell Mom to stop paying your mortgage. I shut the door behind me. I walked down the stairs, my boots crunching on the salted pavement. The sky was darkening, the short winter afternoon already fading into a bitter gray twilight. I got back into the Tahoe, started the engine, and cranked the heat. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Mom. Ashley just called me crying. She said Greg left. She said they're losing the house. What is happening? Where are you? Please call me, I stared at the screen. The entire family structure was collapsing. The lies they had all told each other for decades to maintain their little hierarchies were tearing them apart. And I was the only one who had the full picture. I was the only one holding the keys to the only asset left. Before I could type a reply to Mom, another message popped up. It was from the paralegal at David's law firm. Hey, sorry to bother you on a weekend. David asked me to pull the full tax history on the Estes Park property for the defense file. I found something weird. You should look at this. Attached was a PDF file. I frowned, my thumb hovering over the screen. I tapped the attachment. It downloaded and opened in my phone's document viewer. It was a copy of a Larimer County tax assessment from 7 years ago, 4 years before the foreclosure crisis that forced me to step in. I zoomed in on the document. The amount due was standard. The property description was accurate, but I looked at the bottom of the page where the payment history was recorded. The taxes for that year hadn't gone unpaid. They had been paid in full via a cashier's check drawn from a bank in Denver, and the name listed as the remitter on the cashier's check wasn't Grandpa's. It was Ashley's. I stared at the screen, the glaring white light of the PDF reflecting off my eyes in the dimming cabin of the Tahoe. I zoomed in on the remitter line again, just to be sure. It was her name, Ashley Harrison. I didn't call David back. I didn't reply to Mom's frantic text. I just tapped Ashley's number in my recent call log and put the phone to my ear. She picked up on the first ring. What? She asked, her voice hollow and raw. 7 years ago, I said, my voice completely steady. 4 years before the foreclosure crisis. You paid his property taxes, $12,000 via cashier's check. There was a long, terrible silence on the line. I could hear the faint sound of a television playing somewhere in her massive empty house. How did you find that? She whispered. My lawyer pulled the historical tax records for the defense file, I said. Why didn't you say anything last night? When I threw my receipt on Grandpa's lap, why didn't you tell everyone you had bailed him out first? Because, she said, her voice cracking, he made me swear on my life not to tell a soul. I closed my eyes. The puzzle pieces were finally sliding into place, forming a picture so ugly and pathetic I almost felt sick. He told me he made a mistake, Ashley said, the words spilling out of her in a rush. He said he missed a couple of payments and the county was being aggressive. He begged me for the 12 grand. He said if Mom or Ryan found out, it would break the family apart. He told me. She stopped, taking a jagged breath. He told me I was the only one he could rely on, the only one who actually cared about the legacy. He ran the exact same script on you, I murmured. What? When he was about to lose the house to the reverse mortgage 3 years later, he went to Mom, I said. He told her the same thing, and she came to me. He made me swear not to tell you, because it would ruin his pride. He siloed us, Ashley. He played us against each other so he wouldn't have to face the humiliation of failing in front of the whole family. I thought I was the only one holding it together, she sobbed. When you showed up last night with that receipt, I felt like an idiot. I thought he had fixed his life after I helped him. I thought he was stable. I didn't know he took out a reverse mortgage. I didn't know he was in collections. And you resented me, I said softly. You resented me because I left for Seattle, and you thought you were stuck in Denver paying the toll to keep his kingdom afloat. Yes, she whispered. And when Greg lost the Lodo clinic, I continued, tracing the frost on the steering wheel. He knew you had a blind spot for the cabin. He knew you thought you had a rightful claim to it because you bailed Grandpa out 7 years ago. He used your own resentment to manipulate you into supporting the lawsuit. I was so stupid, she cried. We're all so stupid. No, I said, looking out at the dark highway. We're just infected. Grandpa's pride is a disease, and it infected all of us. Ryan thought he could steal the deed to day trade because Grandpa convinced him I was the enemy. You thought I was a parasite because Grandpa told you that you were the sole savior. Greg thought he could use the house as an ATM because the whole family is obsessed with appearances over reality. Ashley just cried quietly into the phone. There were no more defenses, no more smug superiority, just a broken woman sitting in a house she was about to lose, realizing her entire identity as the family matriarch was built on a lie an old man told to protect his ego. What do we do? She asked. We stop playing, I said. What does that mean? It means you focus on your divorce. You hire the best lawyer you can afford, and you protect whatever cash Greg hasn't burned. You don't call Grandpa. You don't call Ryan. You don't try to fix them. And the cabin? The cabin stays in the trust, I said. It's bulletproof. Ryan's quitclaim deed will be rejected by the county clerk on Monday. Greg's lawsuit is dead. Grandpa's collections agency will never find the asset. The house is safe, and it's going to stay safe until the day he dies. And then the trust executes exactly as written. The property gets sold, I get my initial investment back, and the rest is split equally. Just like I promised. After everything they tried to do to you today, Ashley said, her voice filled with genuine disbelief. You're still going to let them have their cut? Yes, I said, because I don't need their money, and I don't need their approval anymore. I ended the call. I sat in the Tahoe for a few minutes, listening to the heater blow. The deep, aching exhaustion in my bones was still there, but the suffocating weight on my chest was gone. The family mythology was dead. The illusion of the great stoic patriarch was shattered. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt profoundly, beautifully detached. I pulled my phone out one last time and opened the group chat. Mom, Ashley, Ryan, and Grandpa. I hadn't sent a message in this thread in over 2 years. I typed out a single text. The trust remains exactly as it is. The house is secure. I am flying back to Seattle tomorrow. Do not contact me about the cabin, the taxes, or the deed ever again. Have a good life. I hit send. I didn't wait to see the read receipts. I didn't wait for the inevitable frantic replies from Mom or the angry denials from Ryan. I turned the phone off completely, holding the power button until the screen went black. I tossed it onto the passenger seat. I shifted the Tahoe into drive, pulled off the icy shoulder, and merged back onto I-70, pointing the car toward the airport. I was going to change my flight, pay the exorbitant same-day change fee, and catch the red-eye back to the Pacific Northwest. The snow started falling again as I drove out of the foothills, light and powdery in the glare of the headlights. I turned the radio on, found a station playing low, indistinct jazz, and settled into the driver's seat. For the first time in 32 years, I was exactly what Ashley had always accused me of being. I was the runaway, and it felt entirely like freedom.